Let not your heart be troubled. You are listening to the Sean Hannity Radio Show podcast. How you feeling today? I know what you want to ask me. I know what the question is. I know there is all of the analysis in the world, and every single expert and pro that I know is writing back and forth, and anecdotally we're all trying to glean whatever we possibly can from the voting turnout here in this county and Miami-Dade and Broward and Hamilton County and Franklin County and the Philly suburbs. And, you know, the bottom line is, it's what I said. It is winnable for Donald Trump. It is difficult but winnable. And it's really now in the hands of you, the American people, as it should be. You know, with when all is said and done, we end up, whether we like to hear this or not, with the government we, the people, deserve. And I'm just hopeful that the American people will get this right. There's a lot happening. I think every state that we talked about yesterday matters the same today, starting with Florida. All things begin and start with Florida. You know, the only anecdotal information, a really good friend of mine, I don't know if he wants me to mention him or not, Matt Towery. I've known him for all the years that I was in Georgia when I first went down there in 1992. And he is somebody that I look to with great expertise in voting. When he's saying Hillsborough County, in Tampa, Florida, turned out early in Election Day at 72% in 2012. As of 1:30 this afternoon, the combined early and Election Day vote in Hillsborough had already reached 63%. And there's a lot of hours. That's from 1:30 p.m. Eastern time this afternoon. It's now a little after 3 Eastern. So with hours to go, his belief and analysis and expectation is that the vote this year is going to far exceed 2012 levels, which seems to be the case not only in Florida but around the nation. That is the anecdotal evidence I have gotten. Now, not the case where I voted earlier today, but Linda apparently waited in line 3 hours today to get her vote in. How long did everyone else wait in there? How long did you wait? Jason, did you wait a long time?
No, not really. It took me about 15 minutes.
50 or 15?
15.
Okay, and Sunshine, how long did you wait?
I was there for almost an hour.
Okay, and Ethan, how long did you wait?
5 minutes. I was the third person to vote.
Okay, I basically walked up and voted. So, and you were, 2 or 3 hours, Linda? How long total? I saw your line.
Yeah, it was a long line. I mean, it was about 2 hours, you know, but it was worth it.
That's a lot. Yeah.
It was worth it, man.
Of course. Well, look, I don't think New York is all of a sudden going to end up in play, but it's, I think it's still important to vote because then you get into this whole electoral college debate versus the popular vote. I mean, Democrats are going to run up massive numbers. I mean, that's one thing I don't think that's factored in enough in the polls, which is, you know, are they polling a lot of people in California? Okay, you know, Hillary Clinton, any leftist liberal is going to win that state by a huge margin, or New York, or in most cases, New Jersey. I think Trump might outperform in New Jersey better than people think. But we'll have to wait and see. And, you know, I stayed up late last night. I watched Trump's final speech in Grand Rapids. He threw on the schedule late. It must have been about 1 in the morning. And I think he finished as tough and as strong and as committed as I think he's ever been. In many ways, I have known this guy for years. I think he's a changed person. And I don't think he's had time to reflect on what the changes really are, but his passion to do this job is real. I mean, I think he was outworking Hillary Clinton by, doing 8 states to her 2. Anyway, back to the anecdotal evidence of my friend Matt Towery. He goes on to say, so he thinks his guess is that they've already reached 63% of the vote total in 2012, which is a pretty high number. This is Tampa, Hillsborough County. And with hours to go, he thinks the numbers will far exceed 2012. And that is the anecdotal, I repeat that, evidence that we're getting all around the country, not only Florida, but around the nation. And he says, and his conclusion of this is, I can only remember 2 times when we've had such a wave of voting. 1980, Reagan, 2008, Obama. And his next line is, and Secretary Clinton is no Obama. And it fits his view that the polls have underestimated and miscalculated the turnout in the weighting models. Look, at some point during this program today, I am going to get the exit polling data. And you'll watch the media. Early data waves did not impress the media. They weren't particularly happy. That I can tell you. I'm not supposed to report any of it, and I will keep my word because I have people that are counting on me to keep my words. But, I'll give you a little anecdotal stuff that I think that will be important to you. But the bottom line is you shouldn't pay attention to it. It shouldn't impact you. If you're on the West Coast in particular, you've got to ignore it. And you've got to just go with where your heart is. And, where is your heart in this election? What do you think matters the most? My big question is, are you better off than you were 8 years ago? Did Barack Obama's hopey and changey and yes, we can and Obama, did it do anything for you and your country and your life? And based on all of the data that I have given out this entire election season, if you want, I'll repeat it. I don't have to. But I wanted to make sure that by repeating it every day that you understood things not only didn't get better, things didn't change for the better, things got dramatically worse, both at home and abroad. America's future to me today is on the ballot. The front page of today's New York Post has a photo of a woman holding her nose with the headline, "Vote for the one you dislike the least." Now, the Post is my favorite newspaper, but in this case, I think they're 1,000% wrong. This is not one of those elections where you are choosing, to me, between the lesser of two evils. I think we get to choose today. Look, and the first thing, if you want to tell me that Donald Trump didn't spend his entire life preparing to be the president or run for the presidency, well, that's fairly obvious. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gone on to Howard Stern's show. It's fairly obvious because he didn't lead the lifestyle of the typical politician that does all the right things. But in a way, it's always been refreshing to me because over the years that I've studied and watched these politicians, they're just the opposite of Trump. And as much as they put their best public face forward, and behind the scenes, they're far worse than what you'd ever imagine. And I think with Trump, it's actually kind of the opposite, that you kind of see his flaws up front. He wears them on his sleeve, but behind the scenes, he's actually a better person, which I think was what motivated him to run, which is, it's just not politics. Take from that what you will. And I think we have two very distinct visions for the future of the country. We have one choice. We continue the direction that has failed the last 8 years. We have the other choice. We change direction. And in some ways, actually reverse direction. One candidate wants to expand on her party's liberal orthodoxy. The other candidate wants to break with the party line on trade, immigration, the economy, and foreign policy. Rosie Gray is a reporter at the Daily Beast who actually, shockingly, I gave her a shot. I said, all right, you know what? I don't trust you. I know who you write for, but I'm going to give you a shot. And I gave her a chance. I said, the only thing I ask is that you quote me directly. And she absolutely gave very specific quotes that I gave her. And I said, all right. So I gave her another interview today. And she says, win, lose, or draw, what do you think this means for the future of the Republican Party? And I saw Dylan Byers. There is the old Republican order, regardless of what happens today. And I do believe that Donald Trump is very much in this. The old Republican order, I told her, is dead. It's done. It's finished. There is no going back. And, I remember Reagan famously said in a CPAC speech, because I've quoted it so often, is it a third party we need or a revitalized second party with no pale pastels but bold color differences? And he made the argument we need a revitalized second party, Republican Party. Now, I'm fine whichever way it happens. But the old Republican Party, where they make promises that they're going to repeal and replace Obamacare, and they're not willing to fight, they're not willing to use their enumerated powers to get rid of those parts of Obamacare that they could have. You know, when 2014 becomes a referendum on illegal, unconstitutional executive amnesty, and then they punt it to the courts because they don't want to fight for fear that they're going to get blamed for a government shutdown, and the only person that stood up in the Senate was Ted Cruz and Rand Paul and Marco Rubio and Mike Lee, then basically there's no difference between the two parties. If John Boehner is going to allow, with the power of the purse, the debt to go up $5 trillion, that Republican Party is useless to me. If the Republican Party is going to commit brave men and women to fight, bleed, and die like they did in Iraq and not fight to retain the victory, then that's not the party that's going to win. Look, the Republican Party better understand what's happening here. With 95 million Americans out of work, with the lowest labor participation rate since the 70s, the lowest home ownership rate in 51 years, the worst recovery since the 40s, 13 million more Americans on food stamps, 8 million more Americans in poverty, 1 in 5 American families without a single family member working, 1 in 6 American men 18 to 34 in jail or living in mommy and daddy's basement. There's something radically wrong. Now, if they're going to cater to cheap labor, and that's the reason that they never built the wall that they promised us in 2006, if they're not going to have a message, solutions that resonate with those people in Michigan and Minnesota and Wisconsin and Ohio and Pennsylvania, that's going to make the working lives of these hard, great Americans better, then that party's dead. You know, one of the most underreported, I think, things about Donald Trump's platform is this New Deal for African Americans, for black Americans, where he says, we're going to go in, we're going to fix your broken down, dilapidated schools. You know, nearly 4,000 people died in Chicago alone since Obama's been president, 3,000 shot in Chicago this year alone. You know, and Trump says, we're going to get rid of the violence. We're going to fix these schools. We're going to send education back to the states. And we're going to incentivize multinational corporations to bring their money back and become energy independent. So we'll have millions and millions of high-paying jobs and incentivize these companies to build the factories in Michigan and in Wisconsin and Minnesota and Pennsylvania and Ohio. Unless the Republican Party has the answers to help those people that are suffering in massive numbers, they're useless. Unless they go into the black community and say, the Democrats take your vote for granted every 4 years. They've never fixed your schools. Your neighborhoods aren't safer. There's more drugs than ever before. The violence is out of control. And here's how we're going to fix it. Here's a ladder to success. Unless they do these things, it's going to be the same old model every 4 years, the same old electoral map every 4 years. You know, if they don't show that there is a free market-based answer to health care, if they don't show the benefits of energy independence, if they don't go into working neighborhoods and say, I never got a job from a poor person, and if I allow trillions of dollars repatriated into this country from multinational corporations with the stipulation that they've got to build factories and manufacturing centers in cities that are half dead like Detroit, you've got to make that case, but you got to go there and you got to do it. But Republicans have lost any sense of vision, any sense of fight, any sense of a backbone, and they have basically capitulated. So the old Republican order, I'm telling you, and I'll go through this tomorrow, and I'll go through this on Thursday, but the old Republican order will never be the same. Win, lose, or draw today. You know, they had the autopsy, the famous autopsy of the Republican Party. What went wrong with Mitt Romney? Mitt Romney went into that election, you know, most days before, and it switched at the end, but the polls are often in presidential election years off by a ton. Off by about 3 percentage points. So you don't know. The IBD poll, which has been the most accurate in the last 3 election cycles, in the end had Trump +2, LA Times, Trump +3. Others had Hillary +2, 3 in that range as well. So, you know, by all accounts, somewhat deadlocked. No real indicator of how the election's going to go. Let me just explain a little bit more about what I mean. And I actually plan to get into more of this after today, after the results are in. But the Republican Party still doesn't get how we got to this point in the election. They don't understand it. Either they don't understand it or they don't want to understand it. And I probably would argue it's the latter. When every single, like, for example, I've done focus groups of this radio program. I've done research on what you, my customers, have to say about me, or on television, what you have to say about me. And if 2/3 of you are telling me that I need to shut up, that I talk too loud, that I interrupt too much, that I digress too much in my speech patterns, at some point, I've got to look at that and say, that is a loud, resounding message, and it better start resonating with me so I can make my customers happy and give them more of what they want. When you look at the primary results in this election cycle, when we started out with 17 Republicans, on average, it was about 63 to 66% of Republican voters saying they felt betrayed by the D.C. Republican Party. And it was all across the board. And for some of the examples that I brought up in the last half hour, and that is that they promised to repeal and replace Obamacare. Now, they did have their show votes, some 40, 50 show votes so they could be able to go home to their district and tell their constituents, see, I voted to repeal and replace Obamacare, but it never had any real teeth in it. And a lot of times politicians have what I call show votes. But if they really wanted to repeal the aspects of Obamacare that they couldn't, it wouldn't have been the whole thing. They had a power available to them, enumerated power, constitutionally, the power of the purse. They didn't want to use it. When you talk as a party about small government and limiting the bureaucracy and the dangers of debt and deficits, and you have control of the House of Representatives, and John Boehner is your speaker, and he has control of the power of the purse, and during his tenure, the debt goes up nearly $5 trillion. There is culpability and responsibility on the part of Republicans for not taking that stand and saying, no, we're going to fix this, and we don't care that Obama's going to blame us, but we're taking a stand on principle. Now, there's certain political risks involved with that. You might think, oh, there might be a backlash. Oh, I might get voted out. Oh, I'm creating controversy. Oh, I'm going to have to explain why the government is shut down. Oh, Obama's going to say we want poor people to starve. Oh, Obama's going to say that veterans are going to get hurt because of our actions. Now, there are certain mitigating powers. You could start passing bills that would keep funding the military and taking care of our vets and taking care of Social Security, stopgap measures, spending measures that you could use. But in the end, I mean, Jamie Dupree and I used to go through this day in and day out at the time, what powers they actually had and what they had available to use and they didn't use. If you say to the Republican rank and file in 2014, we see a president that 25 times says, oh, I don't have the authority of my own. I can't do it on my own. I just can't, I got to go through Congress. And he says he got to go through Congress, that he can't just, with the wave of a pen, through executive fiat, change the immigration laws, and he says he doesn't have the constitutional authority to do it, and then he does it anyway, and every Republican says, give us the Senate, we'll stop his unconstitutional, illegal actions, executive orders on immigration, and then they get the Senate, and then they're stupid enough to give away all the leverage that they have, and they end up funding, in the end, executive amnesty, and their excuse is, well, we sent it to the courts because they didn't want to get blamed for a government shutdown again, and that was the power that Obama would constantly use on them. Basically, Obama got his entire agenda passed with little to no opposition. And the first argument was, well, we only have 1/3 of the power of government with the House of Representatives. Well, there's a reason that our framers put together separation of powers, enumerated powers, co-equal branches of government. And if you have the enumerated power of the purse and you're unwilling to use it, if you're unwilling to fight, if you're unwilling to take a stand, a courageous stand, well, that's why I think we got to the point where 2/3 of Republicans felt betrayed. And they felt like the entire Obama agenda, went unchecked. And thus, therein lies why the two finalists for the Republican primary ended up to be Donald Trump and Ted Cruz. Now, they had something in common. They're both insurgents. They're both hated by the establishment. They're both outsiders. And I think it was a direct message from the people, just like in 2010, that they wanted a dramatic shift and change in Washington. What Republicans seem to be missing and what Donald Trump has tapped into is not what they think it is. An analysis of the media is going to tell you that Donald Trump tapped into anger, and he tapped into racism and xenophobia and Islamophobia. It's not it at all. What they're missing here is what I have been telling you now for the better part of a year and a half, that people in this country are suffering badly because of failed government. They're suffering. They see the lowest labor participation rate since the 70s. They see the first president never to reach 3% GDP growth. They see 95 million of our fellow citizens that are out of the labor force. They see the lowest home ownership rate in 51 years, the worst recovery since the 1940s. They see Obama not only didn't have shovel-ready jobs, they weren't so shovel-ready, but they see 13 million of our fellow citizens, additional Americans, nearly 50 million of them, now on food stamps. 8 million more Americans that live in poverty, nearly 50 million Americans living in poverty. 1 in 5 American households, not a single family member working. 1 in 6 American men, 18 to 34 in jail or living in mommy's basement. These are millions of Americans that are suffering needlessly, and we have a government, for example, energy, a simple issue, the lifeblood of the American economy. We have more natural gas. We have more oil we could drill for. We have more coal, clean coal, that we could extract than we would ever need in 200 years. And yet America is too stupid to create the millions of jobs, the added bonus of national security benefits. We would never have to fight a foreign war in the Middle East for a long, long period of time. Oftentimes it is our national interest for oil, for energy, that compels us to be far more involved than maybe we otherwise would. How many times are we going to ask Americans to fight, bleed, suffer, and die, lose their limbs, come back disfigured, only to have people like Hillary, who sent them, then pull them out, take the cities they won, Mosul, Ramadi, Fallujah, Tikrit, Baghdad, create an opening for ISIS, and they have the energy resources to expand their terror reign, as they have done. How many times? This is where Republicans are out of touch. This is where the old order Republican Party, they are either going to change or die. they better start paying attention to what the people in Pennsylvania are saying, what the people in Pennsylvania need, what the people in Michigan are saying and what they need, and in Wisconsin and in Minnesota and in Ohio and in Florida, the elderly population in Florida. And they better understand that if they're not the party for the working man, if they're not the party of job creation, if they're not the party of energy independence, if they're not the party of better health care at a much lower price because of free market competition, if they don't have the capacity to go into every neighborhood, town, and city in this country and explain how we can fix our broken educational system, if they don't go talk about how many illegal immigrants are competing with the 95 million Americans out of the labor force for work, and not counter the argument that they're racist or xenophobic, then they've got their own problems. Government is too big, too bloated, too intrusive, taxes are too high, regulation is too burdensome, and it has hurt the American people. And Donald Trump has tapped into, he's been using the phrase recently, the forgotten man. There's an artist that I like, John McNaughton. He has it's his signature painting, The Forgotten Man. And he's got all the presidents behind him and this guy on a bench, with his hands in his head, his life is a mess because government has screwed it up so badly. That is what, when you look at a great city like Detroit that is a shadow of its once former great self, or Flint, Michigan that once had 88,000, auto industry jobs, and they're now down to 8, and they're leaving, even those jobs are in jeopardy. When Ford will make all of their small cars in Mexico, but then bring them back here, it's a problem. And the answer isn't what Hillary Clinton is offering or what Obama has done. Obama's record on the economy is atrocious. If Hillary's elected today, it's going to remain atrocious. I promise you, if Hillary is elected, America's precipitous decline will continue. And that brings us back to the election today. And, if you are in any of these states that matter, well, you know what to do. If you're in Florida and you haven't voted and you're in the Panhandle, if you're in Southwest Florida, if you're in the I-4 corridor area, Tampa to Orlando, go vote. If you're in Tallahassee, vote. If you're in Pensacola, vote. If you're in Jacksonville, go vote. Same with Georgia. Can't lose Georgia and have any shot tonight. North Carolina is, look, Trump, if he's going to have any shot, has got to win Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, Ohio, and Iowa. He's got to start there. And then he's got to win every state. This is why I said it's doable, but it's hard. Then he's got to win every state Romney won. Then he's got to hold Arizona. He's got to try and flip Nevada and Colorado, or maybe even New Mexico. Not an easy task. And then he's got to look to New Hampshire. Those 4 electoral votes in New Hampshire may end up making all the difference in the world tonight. And then the Maine 2nd Congressional District. And then if we're really thinking big and broad, if you care about fracking and energy jobs in Pennsylvania, if you'd like to bring back manufacturing jobs and coal jobs in Pennsylvania, well, you better watch out what Hillary Clinton's bringing you. Pennsylvania would be a game changer if that ever gets in play. And the same with Michigan, game changer if that becomes in play. Never mind Minnesota and Wisconsin. So the path is what it is. And I'd argue that this whole thing that Trump started with a New Deal for black Americans and the African American, this needs to be pushed starting tomorrow. And by pushed, I'm going to be very clear. They need to go, Republicans, and say, Democrats have failed you. Your neighborhoods are not safe. And in many inner cities in America, Chicago is a great example. The schools are a disaster. We pay more per capita with the worst results of any industrialized nation. And this is how we're going to fix it. Anyway, anecdotally, by the way, we have apparently in Michigan, working class turnout. Frank Luntz tweeted out is much higher than expected. Trump may have a chance there. Arizona, Republicans now lead by over 100,000 ballots. Colorado right now, which would be huge for Donald Trump if he could flip it. Republicans have a little bit of a built-in advantage, 775,000 to 756,000. Florida, Republicans trail by 78,000 fewer ballots that were cast on Election Day in 2012. Huge turnout reports I'm getting out of Florida. I think Iowa, he's got a good chance. Republicans outperformed in Nevada, 2012's final vote total by 16,000 ballots. In North Carolina, Republicans trailed by 140,000 fewer ballots than 2012, and Romney ended up winning that state. So, but, that's all anecdotal. I hear vote turnout is massive. But America's future is on the ballot here. And there's got to be some dramatic changes. And later this week, I am going to lay out what the changes need to be, win, lose, or draw today. Because I'm just fed up with Americans suffering needlessly.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Welcome aboard Trump Flight 1600 with nonstop service to Canada. We'd like to welcome all our celebrity defectors, and we'll get you out of America just as soon as the tower clears us for takeoff. Once we reach our cruising altitude, flight attendants will pass through the cabin, collecting your U.S. citizenship renewal forms and serving complimentary beverages and disposable crying towels. Once we reach the drop zone, you'll be guided to the exit ramp at the rear of the plane, where you'll take a crash course on parachute folding and be jettisoned shortly thereafter. We'd like to thank you for choosing Trump Airlines and hope you have a soft landing. Bye-bye.
Freedom is back in style. Welcome to the revolution.
We burning down the night, shooting bullets at the moon, baby. This is how we roll.
Sean Hannity. The new Sean Hannity Show. More behind-the-scenes information on breaking news and more bold, inspired solutions for America.
Wow, you witnessed a political miracle. You did it, and I could not be any happier than I am today because this election is about the forgotten man. Anyway, 800-941-SEAN if you want to be a part of this extravaganza. There's so much to get to, and there's so little time. On days like this, I have to slow myself down, and I will. We'll also check in with our pollsters later, John McLaughlin and Doug Schoen. How could they have been so wrong? The exit polls last night had me before I even got off the air, I was telling my staff here, and I didn't want to make you nervous or I didn't want to deflate you because I never believe exit polls. How many days in a row now have I been warning you that don't believe the exit polls? Don't believe them. Because they turned out to be so wrong and so off base, the media, the analysis. I mean, even at 9 o'clock at night, well, Hillary's going to come in with a mandate. It looks like it's going to be a landslide for Hillary, and Hillary's going to do this, and Hillary, and we've got all that on tape, and we'll get to that later in the program. But that's not what this election is about. Now, I know I told you as of today that there's unfinished business for me. And part of it is that there are so many things, so many people, groups of people that have been so reckless, so irresponsible, so myopic, if you will, about this election. They could never see the big picture. My anger at the Republican Party has never been greater than it is now. It would be easy for me to follow up on that promise and name names today, but I'm not going to do it. And the reason is there's just no point. I will be dealing with other unfinished business by the end of the week, and that is an abusively biased, fundamentally at its core, corrupt news media. It is an absolute disgrace, the media in this country. We have an informational crisis in America it's literally on life support. And they are doing you a disservice. And they pretend to be one thing and fair and balanced and objective, and they're not. And they never have been. And it's so bad that the level of collusion is beyond the pale. And it's usually coming from the very people that are so highly critical of the fact that I am honest about being a conservative. One of the things that I am most appreciative about my job is you give me this microphone every day. You give this opportunity to me every day. You are my boss. You hire me. And if you, for some reason, if I don't do a good job and you don't listen anymore and you don't watch Hannity anymore, I will be fired. It is a reality of the business that I have chosen. And it is in my mind because I have to serve you, and I think the best way to serve you is to be honest and truthful. And I tried to do that in this election cycle, and I am proud. And I told my staff today, I thanked all of them because, like in 2007 and 2008, in many ways, we went out on a limb. And there were many, many times in 2007 and 2008 where even my friends were calling me saying, you're going to ruin your career. You're done. You're going way too far. You're pushing this so hard. Black liberation theology and Frank Marshall Davis and Reverend Wright and Bill Ayers and Bernadine Dorn and Father Flager and Alinsky and Acorn and, you know, voting present and everything else that I would go through. And for the first time in my adult life, I am proud of my country and all of this. But that's who I am. I felt an obligation to you to go out on that tree branch, and if I was going to stand out there alone, there were a couple of others that were with me. I'm not saying I'm unique, but it was pretty much the us at times, because I feel I owe you that. I am very proud in spite of what other people say. There was, Linda says to me, first thing I walk into, you know, the articles were written, biggest losers in the campaign, Sean Hannity. And I knew that that would have happened if Donald Trump lost yesterday, and I was fully comfortable and prepared and at peace and at ease with whatever fire was coming my way, because I knew what this election was really about, and the only question I had is whether or not the people would come through. There is a friend of mine I'm not a big art guy. I don't understand art. I've taken art history classes. You know, if I look at the Sistine Chapel, I am absolutely dazzled, amazed, inspired at talent that I know that I don't have. And one guy that I really like because of the themes of his work is my friend John McNaughton. I bought one, two, at least three, maybe four paintings from him now. I don't remember. I just, you know. Anyway, he had written he had his masterful painting, his signature painting is called The Forgotten Man. And I put it up on my website if you want to take a look. Is it up there now? Yeah, if you want to take a look at it. Because this is what this election was about for me. And the only question I had is whether or not people were hearing me. And it's amazing that so much analysis last night was so wrong and so bad and so out of touch with what was going on in this country. It was beyond frustrating to listen to half of it. And I just preferred to do my own analysis of, all right, how many votes are out in Milwaukee County? How many votes are out in Broward and Miami-Dade? How many votes? Why isn't Hamilton County coming back stronger than I thought it would? What are the votes in Cuyahoga County in Ohio? And so that's how I spent the majority of my night. I didn't go to the Hilton. I didn't go to the party. I stayed home, and I stayed up all night. And I literally am on less than an hour's sleep. So if I sound incoherent at any point during the program, or if you hear something like this, that will be my head dropping to the desk where I'm now doing this radio program. But here's what they missed, and this is what this election was about. All year long, I told you every single day on this program what this election would be about, what this election should be about. And it really, now I just have a name for it. The painting captures what it's about. The Forgotten Man, and it's called The Forgotten Man. Amity Shales wrote the book, The Forgotten Man. I'm not originating this. But there's a reason well beyond me wanting to repeat myself every day. I went on with my friends Rick and Bubba this morning, and I think it was Rick that said to me, yeah, my son says, there's Hannity, he's giving out the stats, 95 million Americans out of the labor force. But I want to say it in a little different way today, because this is what the election was about. We have so many millions of our fellow citizens that are suffering so badly, that have been so mistreated, that have been so betrayed by the political class, that this culminated in one of the most historic elections in American history yesterday. They are the forgotten people that stood up to the media establishment. Yes, the Republican Party establishment that wasn't supporting Trump. The Democratic Party establishment that wasn't supporting Trump. And the globalist establishment that does not have your best interests at heart. And the thing about Trump, he was able to do all of this with all of this opposition in front of him. There were very, very few of us that saw the potential and listened to his ideas about how to fix the economy, get people back to work. But when we have a situation where we have nearly 50 million Americans, 50 million in poverty, 8 million more under Obama, 50 million on food stamps, 13 million more Americans on food stamps under Obama. When you have a situation where you have the lowest labor participation rate since the 70s, 95 million of our fellow citizens that can no longer find jobs or work. When you have the worst recovery since the 1940s, when you have the lowest home ownership rate in 51 years, when you have 1 in 5 American families that don't have a single member of their family that has a job, and 1 in 6 American families, 1 in 6 American men 18 to 34 that are either in jail or out of work living in mommy's basement, and you see corporations leaving in droves, when you see that there's trillions and trillions of dollars of multinational corporation parked overseas because Washington will so screw these companies that they can't afford to bring the money back and invest in factories in Michigan and factories in Wisconsin and manufacturing centers in Pennsylvania and manufacturing centers in Ohio. And when in all the process a president, I guess the shovel-ready jobs aren't so shovel-ready. When you have a government that makes a solemn promise and vow that you're going to keep your doctor, keep your plan, the average family saves $2,500 a year, and people by the millions lose their doctor's plans and pay under Obama up till this year an additional $4,100 a year as wages have gone down. When African Americans vote for Obama 93%, and after 8 years, you have a 58% increase of black Americans on food stamps, a 20% increase black Americans out of the labor force. And then we accumulate in the process, not only is spending the money we have, record money that we take in, enough, then we rob our kids blind and have a president accumulate more debt than every other president before him combined. Peace and prosperity drive elections. What happened yesterday is all of those people, those statistics, the millions in poverty on food stamps out of the labor force, not not, when you have 60% of black teens can't get a summer job. All of those people united and said enough is enough. And Republicans that promised that they would repeal and replace Obamacare but wouldn't use their constitutional power of the purse because they care more about their own power, they're probably worse than the Democrats. And the Republicans that say they believe in limited government, and yet they accumulated more debt under John Boehner, nearly $5 trillion in new Boehner debt, because he didn't want to shut the government down or get blamed for a government shutdown, because he put himself and his members ahead of what was right for the forgotten men and women in this country. And then when you have 2014 as a referendum and on the whole issue of stopping illegal, unconstitutional executive amnesty that Obama himself admitted 30 times was illegal and unconstitutional. And then when they get the Senate and they say they're going to do it, then they pass Cromnibus, say they're going to defund the Department of Homeland Security, and the Senate, just like the House, didn't have the courage to stand up for the promises they made to the American people. What happened yesterday is not hard to figure out. Government has failed we, the people, on a spectacular level. Instead of me spending my time naming names, instead of me wasting my time with grievances with people that were so ignorant, blind, and stupid that they would rather Hillary have been appointing the next Supreme Court justices, I'd rather focus in on how do we get those factories, those manufacturing centers, those jobs back, people out of poverty, off of food stamps? How do we get energy independent? How do we get our budget balanced? What do we replace Obamacare with? What are the health care savings accounts? How is that going to transition? How do we get education back to the states? How do we get the wall built? How do we rebuild our dilapidated military? And all of those solutions. By the end of the week, if I can find the energy, I've started working on what the plan is. Because I care, because my roots are the same roots as all of the people that spoke so loudly yesterday. The decade being the dishwasher, the cook, the waiter, the busboy, the bartender, the painter, the paper hanger, the tile layer, the roofer, the framer. A couple of decades of my life. That's what I'm going to focus on, because that's what matters. You know what? For whatever little time God keeps me behind this microphone on TV, that's all I care about. I love this country. I'm so proud of all of you and what you did yesterday.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Welcome aboard Trump Flight 1600 with nonstop service to Canada. We'd like to welcome all our celebrity defectors, and we'll get you out of America just as soon as the tower clears us for takeoff. Once we reach our cruising altitude, flight attendants will pass through the cabin, collecting your U.S. citizenship renouncement forms and serving complimentary beverages and disposable crying towels. Once we reach the drop zone, you'll be guided to the exit ramp at the rear of the plane, where you'll take a crash course on parachute folding and be jettisoned shortly thereafter. We'd like to thank you for choosing Trump Airlines and hope you have a soft landing. Bye-bye.
All right, glad you're with us. 25 now till the time. That's done by a friend of ours from Atlanta. I thought that was hilarious. Now, we did make the offer, and I'm going to stand by my pledge. Any of these celebrities that were saying if Trump wins, they're going to leave, and there's a total freak out. If they want to go to the country of their choice, I will charter the plane. I'll put on champagne, wishes, and caviar dreams, and we'll get ready, and we'll fly you to that country. There is one stipulation. And I see Barry Diller wants to leave over the shock. The stipulation is simple, and that is that if we pay for your ticket, well, if I pay for your plane out of here, you never come back. And if you come back, and it's going to be a lifestyle change for you on the plane, it'll be gold-plated everything in Donald Trump style. It'll be filled with champagne wishes and caviar dreams. Look at this elaborate bedroom that will take you straight out of the United States into the communist socialist regime of your choice. And we'll put steaks. We'll make it really good for you. But let's see. Bryan Cranston, Samuel L. Jackson. He said, I'm moving my black blah, blah, blah to South Africa, he said to Jimmy Kimmel. Lena Dunham. A lot of people have been threatening to do this, but I really will. I know a lovely place in Vancouver. Okay. Neve Campbell. I used to like her. She was a good actress. What happened to her? Anyway, she said she would move back to Canada while Orange is the New Black actress, Natasha Lyonne, would hightail it to a mental hospital. Okay, we can arrange that if you want. Cher tweeted this summer that if Trump gets elected, I'm moving to Jupiter. Okay, I don't think I can help you with the Jupiter flight. It's got to be, somewhere on the planet Earth. Miley Cyrus wrote back in March in tears that I'm moving if he is the president. I don't say things I don't mean. Barbara Streisand told 60 Minutes, I'm either coming to your country if you'll let me in or Canada. Okay. Neo told TMZ he moved to Canada. Let's see, Amy Schumer said in September the Spain would be her destination of choice. Chelsea Handler said she'd already made contingency plans months ago. I did buy a house in another country just in case, she said on Live with Kelly and Michael. So these people that threaten to leave the country, I actually will leave the country, she said. Jon Stewart, little Johnny, with his head up Obama's you-know-what, said he'd consider getting in a rocket and going to another planet. What? Can he take Cher with him? Maybe they'd save money. Maybe they'll get the group rate. Because the planet's gone bonkers if Trump wins. Whoopi Goldberg, we want Whoopi to stay. Whoopi's always been nice to me. Oh, she said white lash this morning, too, like Van Jones? Good grief. I don't even know. George Lopez said he won't have to worry about immigration. If Trump takes the White House, we'll all go back. Ruth Bader Ginsburg joked in an interview that it'd be the time to move to New Zealand if Trump wins. Al Sharpton earlier this year said he's reserving my ticket to get out of here. All right, well, listen, the offer stands, but you can't come back, and I'll pay for the trip. All right, I think that's a fair offer. Let me go over again a little bit more what this is about, because nobody's getting this. It's really amazing to me. You want to hear something funny, Linda? You're going to love this. I got a text from a pastor friend of mine. He's a pastor, for crying out loud. I mean, I'm even getting beat up by pastors on all of this stuff, which is a little bit annoying, when the pastor and the people in the pulpit, those are the guys that can drive you crazy. But anyway, let's see. I can't even find. Oh, here it is. He writes, thanks for repeating the stats and issues about this election every day. It did get annoying listening to it every day, but so is my alarm going off in the morning. It just wakes me up. I'm like, really, Pastor? These are millions of Americans suffering, and there's only one person that was ever talking about them was me. And so that's where we are. And, I haven't even mentioned how bad foreign policy is. I mean, I'm betting that the world, you saw the markets last night, and the markets went nuts, and oh, my God, the unknown. I don't even know. What's the Dow? The Dow actually went up today when I looked last. They were up by a lot. So I guess the market said, oh, maybe it's not so bad after all. We can deal with this. Listen, we just dealt with 8 years of the single most radical, incompetent person ever to hold the White House. He doesn't hold a candle to Donald Trump. He had no experience, and it showed every day. It's up 265, the Dow today. So I guess everything didn't go to hell in a handbasket. But this is really, what Trump was up against here was a media establishment that I'm going to deal. I am putting aside time to deal with this corrupt media establishment. I promise you. I just don't want to deal with it today. It was the Republican establishment. It was the Democratic establishment. And it's really this globalist establishment. And this is what happened with Brexit. And this is a political earthquake. And I am saying to the Republican Party, I made a comment last night about, well, I don't know if Paul Ryan will be Speaker in January. You know what? And I thought about it later, and then I tweeted out, I said, it's not my decision. If Donald Trump and the Republicans in Congress, it's almost like we have to hit the reset. And if the Republican Party, and Brett Baer asked me this question last night, he said, well, how is Donald Trump going to get along with the Republicans in the House? And I said, no, that's not the right question. How are they going to get along with his agenda? Because his agenda was the mandate agenda. On the one hand, for those of you that decided to take this leap of faith yesterday and just said you're so disgusted you can't take it anymore, this is, on the one hand, so complicated to fix, but on the other hand, it's really easy. It's not that complicated if you put a number of big ideas together, and this is going to be Donald Trump's biggest test in the next year, really 8 months. He's got to get this done. And that is, can he put in place the pieces to repair the damage and put us on a trajectory towards growth that will result in 3 years, because it took Reagan about 3 years to start seeing the benefits of his plan being implemented. Remember, next year's economy is going to be Obama's economy. So it's, you can't expect, unless they can do something in January, to pull back on some of this and put other means in place. Look, if Donald Trump will do the following: number one, the Supreme Court justice issue, we just saved this country for generations. That's huge. But just on the economy, if he can drop the corporate tax rate to 15%, if he can, half of you Americans, by the way, that are so worried, you're not going to pay a penny in federal income taxes, not 1 cent. And if he can drop it to 15%, if he can allow the repatriation of trillions of multinational corporations, for example, he said 10%. What if he said, we'll let you bring all your money back for 8%, but you got to spend, $50 million in Detroit. You got to spend $50 million in Philadelphia, the city. You got to spend $50 million in the outskirts of Pennsylvania and Wisconsin and Ohio. And in other words, wherever the highest unemployment numbers are, wherever people need help the most, bring that money there. If we allow fracking to continue and really expand it, number one, we have more energy, the lifeblood of our economy, than the entire Middle East combined. But the added benefit is not only national security benefits, but millions and millions of high-paying jobs and careers for so many Americans. If we open the Keystone Pipeline now, if we get rid of Obama's regulations, as he was so beholden to the Flat Earth Society, global warming, global temperature cooling, I can't figure out whether it's cooling or warming crowd, that's going to be huge for the economy. So if he puts a package together that eliminates Obamacare, replaces it with health care savings accounts, if he puts together an energy independence plan where a goal is to be energy independent in 4 years, if he puts that with a tax plan that allows trillions to flood into the economy with the incentive to help out the highest unemployment areas of the country, including the reason these states finally went Republican, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania and Ohio, because they're desperate. And that's why this is the forgotten man election. And if he would do that just on the economy, just that there, if he'd build the wall so competition from illegal immigrants for the few jobs that are available goes away, and we have the added bonus of national security, Al-Qaeda and ISIS can't cross, and then if he would say, okay, we're going to help Syrian refugees, but all the other countries have to pay, including Middle Eastern countries, need to pony up the money so that we can provide the food, medicine, water supplies, and baby formula to help the victims of a civil war in Syria, well, then we don't have to go through the arduous process of trying to vet people that come from cultures and societies where they think men have a right to tell women how to dress, and that women can't drive, and that gays and lesbians get killed, and that jihad and the caliphate is to be advanced for those that are radicalized only. We don't have to risk making bad decisions with vetting, and we're still helping people out. If he can just start with those basic, simple things, lowering taxes, incentivizing the trillions to come back, moving towards energy independence for national security and economic reasons, if he eliminates potential radical Islamists that Clapper and Comey and Steinbeck and Brennan and McCall and Colonel Allen were talking about, that's huge. Not having competition because of illegal immigrants, that's huge. Getting rid of criminal aliens, that's huge. I loved his proposal for a new deal for Black America. If he makes it a priority that we're going to take the federal government out of education, and he should take it into Detroit, take it into New York City, take it into Chicago public schools, take it into South Central Los Angeles, take it into the worst school districts and say, okay, we're going to give it to your state, your community, and it's your responsibility now to educate your kids. Here's the money. Go do it right. I think the parents' involvement and accountability at the local level is going to improve education dramatically. And then it's predicated on the belief, the Latin derivative for education is educare, to bring forth from within. In other words, that believes that every child born has talent, and we just got to nurture that talent, water that talent, put a little sunshine on that talent, and you never know what's going to come out of these kids. Brilliance and genius and invention and who knows what. So those are the things that I think, identify our enemy. And if they try to test Trump needs to hit them so hard that their great-great-great-grandmothers in the grave will feel the vibration of that hit. And if he does that, guess what's not going to happen? They won't mess with us. That's going to take a lot of work because we've let our guard down. We've gone back to a pre-9/11 mentality. But to me, this is what this election was about. Probably like many of you, I just can't wait to roll up our sleeves and get going. And I just say this to Republicans and Democrats. You have failed at a level that is almost incomprehensible. I hope we have term limits, and I hope we implement them, because maybe you'll stop the political calculation whenever it comes a tough moment to take a tough stand and follow through on a tough promise like repealing, replacing Obamacare, the parts you can, and actually doing it and not being afraid your career's going to blow up because you might get fired by your constituents. Maybe if you know you only have 6 years there, you won't give a damn because you know you're going back to your other life and you'll be there to do what's right for the American people. The reason there is so much suffering in this country is a lot of it is caused by government. These are simple, basic, common sense solutions. You bring in trillions that is parked offshore. You lower the corporate tax rate. Multinational corporations will flood into the U.S. They'll build their factories and manufacturing centers. Make sure we go to the areas that need it most first. You can give them tax incentives to do that. Energy independence will help. We'll eliminate Obamacare. Competition will lower the cost and price and choice of every American. Energy independence jobs are going to be amazing. And that's what I'm focused on. All these people said, Hannity, you're in this for ratings. No, I'm in this because I'm tired of seeing my fellow Americans suffer. And the guy that worked in restaurants for a decade and constructions for a decade wants to see the rungs put back in the ladder so people can climb out of poverty and off of food stamps and out of the unemployment line and back to success. That's what I'm praying for, and that's what the Forgotten Man election is all about.